Welcome to the Beau Show. The focal point of today's show is Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, who has the task of regulating our southern border with Mexico and, as his title would suggest, protect Homeland Security. Recall that the position of Secretary of Homeland Security was created in the Bush years, shortly after 9/11, after we learned about homegrown terrorism and the infiltration of our very own free system by those who wished to destroy us. And of course, the border issue with Mexico is nothing new. Drug cartels have long been active moving deadly drugs and people across the border in an international business model that connects all corners of the earth. During the Reagan years, we had amnesty. During the Obama years, we saw border crossings go up and a lack of enforcement of long-standing immigration laws. And then in the Trump presidency, many of those policies began to be enforced, sparking outrage about kids in cages, family separation, and what was perceived to be an inhumane way of treating immigrants. We also saw Trump crack down on the gang situation, especially those members whose home countries were places like El Salvador, where the violent MS-13 gang originated. Gangs like MS-13 were instrumental in both deadly violence and drugs. The Department of Homeland Security is tasked with mitigating gangs like this and curbing the illegal flow of drugs. I have covered the influx of the lethal drug fentanyl on my show, which can be traced back to China and makes its way into Mexico and then on into the United States. With overdoses hitting a yearly record, it's obvious to see that Mayorkas is not effective in preventing this drug from making its way into our country. Mayorkas has come under fire from many congressional Republicans for what they consider to be a very poor job he's doing that is contributing to many problems. However, in our typical hyper-partisan way, he is not taking heat for the very things that the Trump administration has been criticized for, such as this infamous kids in cages phrase we hear so often. Partisan branding is a common yet effective way of swaying public opinion. Kids in cages sounds awful and cruel. Immigration detention centers gave the presumption of racism by President Trump, even if he was merely enforcing laws already on the books and trying to stop drugs and crime. You probably remember the famous soundbite where Trump said this:
"They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people."
Now, with proper context, he wasn't saying that all Mexicans are rapists. He recognized that many people coming from Mexico were indeed part of violent gangs.
It's common sense. They don't want these people, so they send them to the United States because the United States is run by stupid people. We have stupid leadership. We have incompetent leadership that doesn't know what it's doing, so we take them. And certainly we do have killers and plenty of other problems coming over. We take them because other countries don't want them.
But political branding can be brutal, and the left capitalized on this. Trump's policy to shut down travel from China once the coronavirus began to spread was seen also as xenophobic and racist, even though it's plain to see that the virus was making its way over here directly from China. All it takes is a little common sense to see this. The Department of Homeland Security then has to tackle foreign and domestic threats, which now have to include bioweapons or deadly viruses as well. I know that most people don't have time to watch proceedings on Capitol Hill, in part because, well, they're largely boring, but also, unless you're a politics junkie, you might just avoid politics altogether. Oblivion is bliss. But the danger of that is that it permits a biased media to feed you what it wants you to hear. As an example, CBS reported that Kyle Rittenhouse traveled across state lines with his AR-15 looking for trouble. Since that time, CBS has had to correct its story, as its initial reporting on this was dead wrong. Therefore, most people probably don't even know who Alejandro Mayorkas is, much less pick him out of lineup. But he holds the keys to a lot of serious questions that need to be asked. So I watched his testimony in front of Congress because I wanted to know whether this guy was competent or not. He's a Cuban American, and my guess is that in part Biden tapped him as another diversity pick, thinking that his Cuban roots might make him appear more adept at dealing with Hispanic immigration, at least in terms of the public eye. ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is part of DHS, and they have gotten a reputation for their raids of businesses for illegal workers and even gang activity. They are the muscle of the DHS. For this reason, reps like AOC demanded that we get rid of DHS and ICE altogether, which effectively gets rid of any sensible border policy. The progressive wing of the Democrat Party is no fan of any sort of law enforcement in any capacity. Mayorkas, thus, has to be DHS light, so to speak. He's acting in the capacity of his title, but doesn't create any discernible policy. He serves at the pleasure of the president, who gets to decide what he can and can't do. Just recently, DHS decided to maintain the Remain in Mexico policy as well as Title 42 provisions that were signature pieces of the Trump DHS. This put Mayorkas and Biden in a bad spot because they don't want to be seen as doing anything Trump did. They reversed tons of his executive orders on day one. And with cries of racism and xenophobia over building the wall, there are areas where walls of some kind or barriers are quietly still being built. You won't hear about this in the press unless Press Secretary Jen Psaki is asked about it. So when Mayorkas took the stand, you knew that senators like Ted Cruz were going to be chomping at the bit. Take a look at this testy exchange.
In the past year, has Joe Biden been down to see firsthand the Biden cages?
Senator, I will again...
Has Joe Biden been down to see this facility? Yes or no?
The president has not been down to the...
Okay, no. Has Kamala Harris been down to see the Biden cages, this facility? Yes or no?
The vice president was at the border.
Has she been down to see this facility? I know she went to El Paso. Has she seen the Biden cages?
They are not cages. And...
what are these walls?
Senator...
Has Kamala Harris seen them? Yes or no?
Senator,
It's a simple question. Yes or no? We don't need a paragraph. Yes or no? Has Kamala Harris been down to see these detention facilities?
She has not been down.
Okay. Has any Democratic senator on this committee been down to see the Biden cages?
I will once again disagree with your use of terminology.
These facilities, has any Democratic member of this committee given a damn enough to see the children being locked up by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris because of your failed immigration policies?
I laughed out loud when Cruz said, oh, hey, we've got the photo. Mayorkas tried to circumlocute on the semantics of what kids in cages means because he did not want to be associated with it. It also amazed me that Mayorkas, when addled, stumbles over his words and seems woefully unprepared. I mean, the guy knows he's going to be asked about this. How could he be so impotent in his responses? Fauci did the same thing, but he was just slightly more effective liar because he snapped back with a little bit of attitude. I've watched many of the Biden cabinet confirmation proceedings, and these hearings give us some insight into the real mentality of those Biden trusts to lead. Judges who are highly activist or who have written articles about racial justice and critical race theory or even Marxism itself get highly nervous when they are questioned about their past. As a brief aside, watch Senator John Kennedy's questions for this Biden appointee.
Should be asked to get her job. You don't have an opinion about that, and you're going to be a senior official at HUD?
Senator, I think that I don't have the specifics about what is required, and I think we have staff at HUD that would be able to really focus on the specifics of the question.
Oh, my God.
I mean, if it weren't for these hearings, and thank God we have them, we wouldn't really know very much at all about these people. And while we know that these folks get confirmed on strict party lines, it's great that we can learn about a person from these public trials, if you will. More people know who Kyle Rittenhouse is and pedophile hero Jojo Rosenbaum than Attorney General Merrick Garland or Alejandro Mayorkas. I really like Senator Kennedy's style of questioning because it's very common speak and logical. Here he is questioning Mayorkas in this recent hearing.
Just trying to get you to answer my questions. Your administration, the Biden administration, has released into our country people coming across the border, thousands of them who have criminal records. Isn't that the case?
Senator, I'm not aware of thousands of individuals with criminal records who are released into the interior of the United States.
All right, let me try another one.
Who are not
Your
placed-
department has released into our country thousands of people who have promptly gone on welfare. Isn't that the case?
I don't believe that individuals who are unlawfully present in the United States qualify for welfare, but that is something that I'm happy to follow.
You ever been to California?
I grew up for most of my life in California.
Okay, check their rolls.
I wasn't born in this country.
Yes, sir, I know.
I usually find clips like this on Forbes because they do a pretty good job of boiling them down to the meat and potatoes of these hearings. But you're likely not going to hear sound bites from any of these hearings on the major alphabet networks or the left-leaning cable news networks. They have selectively chosen not to cover them because they know it's damaging to their cause. CBS was obviously wrong in its coverage of Kyle Rittenhouse, and you would think that this was such a stupid move due to the libelous coverage of Nick Sandmann, who was able to sue and win money from some of these networks who defamed him from the false reporting. To be honest, Rittenhouse might be able to sue for similar defamation, including Joe Biden himself. So you won't see these exchanges with Mayorkas unless you're really looking for them. In fact, in his very humorous way, Senator Kennedy recently said, quote, "If aliens were to come down and suck the brains out of people, the Biden administration would be safe," unquote. Funny and accurate. And time again, rather than answering the questions of senators like Cruz and Kennedy, Mayorkas begins his spin. He says things like, "Well, Senator, our policy is blah, 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 blah," when he is diverting the question to avoid admitting his department's rampant failures to deal with illegal immigration. We know that at least 1,000 people per day slip through the cracks. Mayorkas was unwilling to do the proper math calculation of the number of immigrants that are unaccounted for. Even consider the military planes that transported Afghans to the U.S. after the Taliban took back over. Watch this.
To those who got on the C-17s and other planes, how many of them were vetted before they got on the plane by American officials?
To the United States, it is our policy to vet and screen 100% of them.
So 100% of those people that got on the plane were vetted. That's your testimony under oath.
It is our policy to do so.
That's not, I don't care what your policy is. I'm asking how many people were vetted before they got on the plane. Do you know the answer?
Senator,
If you don't know, just say I don't know.
Senator, I do not know if anyone boarded a plane that was not fully screened and vetted.
Can you tell me
However,
that all the people that got on the plane were vetted
Absolutely, I can tell you that all of the individuals,
before they got on the plane?
if I may, Senator, all of the individuals who arrived in the United States
Okay.
have been screened and
That's
vetted.
not, listen, I'm not trying to trick you. I'm trying to ask a simple question. We've had thousands of people that got on C-17s and flew out of the most chaotic situation I've seen since the fall of Saigon. And I'm asking you, before they got on the plane, how many of them were vetted by the United States? Can you tell me what percentage?
Senator, I would posit, and I will confirm this, that well over 99% of them were fully screened and vetted before they boarded a flight.
Okay.
If, in fact, any of
Where do you get that information from?
may I, Senator?
Sure.
If, in fact, they were not, they were screened and vetted while in flight, and if any derogatory information was adduced, they were placed in immigration enforcement proceedings and in removal.
Now, you do know you're under oath. Are
Yes.
you telling this committee under oath that 99% of the people who got on these planes in Afghanistan were vetted by our government before they got on that plane?
I want to be very clear because precision.
Because you're not.
No. Senator, if I may.
You see, Mayorkas fumbles again. He knows good and well they didn't screen and vet all those people on board. So he stumbles and fumbles around what the policies are, as though such policies are all that matters. It's a semantical way of not answering the question. This is quite the opposite of former DHS Secretary Tom Homan, who responded to AOC in the following way.
You recommended family separation.
I recommend a zero tolerance.
Which includes family separation.
The same as is with every U.S. citizen parent gets arrested when they're with a child.
Zero tolerance was interpreted as the policy that separated children from their
If I get arrested for DUI and I have a young child in the car, I'm going to be separated. When I was a police officer in New York and I arrested a father for domestic violence, I separated that father
Mr.
from his
Holman,
family.
with all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you're into the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum and go through the port of entry, do it the legal way.
Now see, there's a guy who was ready for questions. He did it in a logical yet poignant way. AOC kept trying to set a trap for him, but Homan never stepped in it. Compare that to Mayorkas, who tries to buy time and use some sort of legal jargon to dodge a question. Mayorkas does not want to admit those kids were in locked rooms. He didn't want to quote immigration numbers because he knows they're bad. He knows that we released a bunch of Afghans here in America, some of which are, statistically speaking, bad actors by default, because they could lie about who they are and their aims. This is how you get homegrown terror cells. It doesn't take much. It's like bed bugs. The damage that could be done from Mayorkas' lack of action in these 4 years of Biden could be devastating. Inaction can be just as dangerous as action. Mayorkas takes his barking orders directly from Biden, but it's not really Biden because he barely knows what day it is. The real policymakers are relatively anonymous people in his administration. Mayorkas is just the figurehead, and a poor one at that. He can't answer basic questions about his department's actions or inactions. He tries to stall as long as he can before the senator's time expires, and then he can take some friendlier questions from Democrats. Immigration is indeed a tough subject because it plays on emotions. And as I said before, the partisan branding around it sways how people view it. If you knew that many of Biden's policies are just carryovers from the Trump policies, you wonder why you voted for Biden. Mayorkas, like many Biden appointees, lacks competence. He can use measured rhetoric, which he has rehearsed, but he comes across incompetent. He's safe from the brain-sucking alien invasion. And we have 3 more years of this too. Homeland Security should protect Americans from all threats and dangers, but it also must maintain a sensible border policy. Usually, the laws we already have there are relatively sufficient. However, catch and release is not a sensible policy. The recent showdown that happened on the Rio Grande was also a reflection of bad policy and a porous border. When they don't come through the proper ports of entry, we have no idea who these folks are, what their history is, and what their intentions are. Airports check your IDs. They want to make sure they know who is flying. That's sensible. Police ask for your license and your insurance if they pull you over for violating a traffic law. That's sensible. But then saying it's racist to require photo ID to vote? That's not sensible. Allowing people to run across the border and for an official to say, well, congrats, you made it. Come back in a year or so and we'll see if you're really seeking asylum. That's not sane. This is all Mayorkas' responsibility. He even claims it's his responsibility when John Kennedy intimated that he's just doing the bidding of Biden. Throughout these clips that I have shown you, you can see how Mayorkas presents the appearance of carefully worded incompetence. Think of the infamous image of putting a hippo in a dress. It's still a hippo. Just because Mayorkas dresses his fumbly words in policy does not mean that he and his DHS haven't mangled multiple fiascos that affect national security and even our economy when you consider things like welfare and refugees. And there is tremendous hypocrisy when it comes to permitting immigrants who are COVID risks. How can the same administration that shut down businesses and forced vaccines be the same administration that is rather carefree when COVID positive or COVID unknown immigrants flow through the borders? They seem to want to require most, if not all, Americans to get it, So why do immigrants get a pass? Mayorkas is one of many Biden cabinet appointees and nominees that seem to be shockingly inept at answering basic questions that pertain to their work. Homeland security is not going to be so secure for these 4 years. And if the recent November elections are any indication of midterms and beyond, people are wising up to this. I listened to quite a bit of Mayorkas' testimony, and he just doesn't seem to have a grip on his job. We want competent people in these leadership roles, but even Biden's cognitive abilities seem questionable. Neither he nor Kamala Harris have been to the border to see these facilities. So how do they even know what policies to enact? How can Border Patrol and ICE do their jobs if their bosses don't have a comprehensive understanding of the adversity that they face? It has been painfully obvious that the Biden administration has a lack of vision on just about everything. Supply chains, economic woes, inflation, foreign policy, COVID, and immigration. Mayorkas is just one spoke on this wheel that is flying off the bicycle. It must be hard to be the person in each agency that has to face the press and Congress when you work for such an incompetent administration. Yet every single one of these agency heads had to be confirmed by the Senate, which is, of course, controlled by Democrats. No surprise. But perhaps not for long. I understand why political parties want to just bull rush through these nominees. But when you do that without hesitation, you risk competence and quality. It's like, are these really the best people to lead the various bureaus and agencies? I've watched hearing after hearing with a number of these nominees or already confirmed figureheads, and I've been amazed at the lack of competence. Let's take a step back and just look at how a person runs a business or even a family household. Each company and each house has its own CEOs, right? We want competent people running our companies and our households. Our finances, discipline, order, accountability, decisiveness, leadership, and vision. That's what you want, right? Yet everywhere you turn in the Biden administration, you see incompetence, if not obliviousness. Everyone on the left talked about all the experience Joe Biden had. 40 plus years of experience. Well, what on earth does he have to show for it? He's a career politician. Someone who shows up at the right times to say the right things, but gets nothing done. Everything you see now is just an extension of what was already obvious to those who pay attention. So folks, please, start paying attention. We have 3 more years of this mess. It's not going to be pretty. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we are not better off than we were a year ago. I'm Beau, and that's the show.